I've got a rapid play game to show you between Magnus Carlsen and Arjun Erigaisi. So this was played in the FIDE World Rapid Team Championship taking place in Hong Kong. And what an event this is. We've just come from Norway Chess with elite players, and now we go to this championship in Hong Kong, which has attracted such an absolutely stellar lineup of players. It's a huge event, and there's obviously a lot of money sloshing around because the strength of the players there is extraordinary. Do check out the official site. I'm looking at the game between Carlsen and Erigaisi. Carlsen's playing for the WR chess team, sponsored by Vadim Rosenstein, who seems to be, throwing his largesse around in many tournaments all over the world at the moment. He obviously has political ambitions. And, this is a cracking game. It's always interesting to look at how Magnus Carlsen is playing. So, let's dive in. Both players had a decent start to the tournament, playing for their respective teams. Carlsen had 2 draws and 2 wins. Erigaisi 3 draws and 2 wins. So this is rapid chess, 15 minutes on the clock, plus 10 seconds each time a move is made. Solid start from both players. Queen's Gambit declined, and Carlsen goes for bishop f4. So this is almost taken over as the main line of the Queen's Gambit declined. Because after bishop g5, it's thought that too many pieces are exchanged. So this keeps more tension. And c5 is the traditional way of meeting bishop f4, because when the bishop is on g5, then there's more pressure on d5, and so in this case, with the bishop on f4, you can get away with playing c5 straight away. Takes on c5 and knight c6, so just delaying the recapture. Black will recapture here, but just bringing the knight out first. Now taking on d5 is the most normal move here, or a3, but bishop e2 from Carlsen. So unpretentious, and black could take on c5 here, but Erigaisi decides to simplify. Normally I associate Erigaisi with wild games. He really goes for it, but a very, very calm move. So that means with the pawns disappearing from the c and d files, there's more chance of pieces being swapped off and a draw taking place. But anyway, let's see. Castles and knight h5. That's a good move. This bishop on f4 is very well placed, controlling key squares in the position. So it makes sense to exchange off this bishop. Now, the bishop could go to g5, but then the bishop could just drop back to e7, and there's going to be more exchanges. Carlsen plays a new move here. Queen e2. So that keeps more tension in the position. Now, an exchange on f4, of course, Erigaisi carries out his plan to exchange off that bishop. But we can see that white is going to be the first to bring the rooks into the middle. So white's development is better than black's. And black still has to solve the problem of what to do about this bishop on c8, which is blocked in. So b6 is therefore a very sensible move. So ready to bring the bishop to the long diagonal. And rook d1. Attacks the queen, so the queen needs to think where to go. No, you don't want to put it on f6, because later on it might be attacked with this. So queen e7 looks normal, and knight e4. So that bishop is a little bit funny on c5, because it can always be exchanged off. Bishop b7. Here is where Carlsen did indeed exchange off the bishop. But it might have been more dangerous to play the knight to g5. And I think this is a very interesting position because there are weak points here on the king side. And a lot of pieces massing in the right place, whereas black really needs a minor piece on the king side to defend well. Now, the computer says this is still in the balance, but I think that's quite a tough position for black to play. But instead, Carlsen, after 3.5 minutes, simplified. And then he went knight g5. Oh, incidentally, if the rook comes down to d7, then that can be expelled, because rook c7 would be met by queen d6, trapping the rook. So anyway, knight g5. So Carlsen is increasing the pressure on the king side. Knight d4. Attacks the queen. So this is a good move. So Erigaisi is starting the fight back. Queen d3 threatens mate in 1. And knight f5. So the queen is blocked out. This is such an interesting position. I think, I'd need a good 20 minutes to try to find out what's going on here. Unfortunately, this is rapid play. They don't have that luxury. With the queen and the knight placed here, of course, g4 is a very tempting move. It might just win a piece. Now, Magnus did not play it. I mean, in a way, it's a most un-Magnus-like move. So why didn't he play g4? Well, just look at this diagonal. That would put you off for a start. But let's look at the detail. I mean, this is so interesting. So queen c6, threatening a mate here. Oops, that was a misfire, but you get the idea. So f3, blocking the diagonal. But then there's a tremendous move, b5. So bishop attacked. So basically what this does is open this diagonal. So bishop b3, queen b6 check. So this is a very sensitive spot. Now, black is still in danger here because of the knight, but rook d8 hits the queen. The queen goes back, an exchange. Now, take care. Bishop takes d1. There's still a threat here, still a threat to the knight, but h6. So obviously if the knight moves away, then the black knight will be able to move. So pawn takes knight. And black has given up a pawn. However, white's kingside is an absolute wreck with this pawn advance. Best move here for white is, of course, to cheat and return the pawn to g2. But yeah, with this pawn lunge, g4, g5, well, g4 anyway, it's left this pawn really vulnerable. And I mean, this position is still in the balance, but I wouldn't want to play this with white. It doesn't look very nice at all. So after a minute and 50 seconds, Carlsen played rook e1. So it might be that he's building up to a sack on e6. It's a very frightening position for black. But Erigaisi played queen c6. So again, this battery on the long diagonal. And of course, it's possible to defend this pawn with the queen from f1 or maybe h3. But you don't want to. Well, you've got to hold on to that bishop for a start, and you don't want to tie your queen to defending here. So Carlsen played f3, blocking the diagonal. However, as we saw before, this opens things up. And now Erigaisi played a brilliant move. This move b5 again. If bishop b3, then a check and rook d8. So you can see from b6, the queen covers the d8 square, enabling rook d8, and suddenly, white is getting pushed around. So this is the idea about b5. It creates space for the queen. So if bishop takes b5, again, this is very uncomfortable for white. Push the knight, and knight d4, well, and that's a fork. So Magnus decided very quickly just to take on e6. So he's just not backing down. I guess, this is why he played rook e1. But queen b6 check. King went in the corner, rook f6. So Carlsen has centralized beautifully, but he's now a piece for 2 pawns down. And Erigaisi has to be very careful of this diagonal. But h6, queen b3 check, knight f7. And the best that Carlsen could come up with was just to swing the knight round to the middle. Now, white's pieces are still beautifully placed, and the pawn on f3 does shut out the bishop on b7. But black is a piece up. Erigaisi played rook d8. That's a very pragmatic move. He's prepared to give back some material just to bring his pieces into play. In fact, it was possible just to play bishop c6, covering the d7 square, and maybe that bishop will simply find a good home on e8, shutting out the knight, and then the queen's rook will come into play. But rook d8, yeah, you don't know how much time you have in rapid play chess. I mean time on the chessboard. And so rook d8 is a really pragmatic move. So it does return material, knight d7, forks queen and rook. So Erigaisi gave back some material, but he's still got bishop and knight against rook and 2 pawns. And he was obviously banking on this move, queen f2. Right, I think it's time for you to have a think. I'm going to have a drink. Cheers. What would you play if you had white in this position? White to play. Do you want to improve your chess? Get access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month, you get a newsletter with a test game, calculation puzzles, a monthly opening survey, access to an archive with over 100 opening surveys. And you can join in live masterclasses exclusive to patrons, where you can ask me questions directly over Zoom. All for only $25 per month. Do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess and join the club. Don't forget, the next live masterclass exclusively for patrons will take place on Tuesday, the 30th of June. Right, let's get back to the game. So what did you come up with here? What should Carlsen play? In fact, the best move is a rook g1. Looks quite passive. At least the rook is passive, but that queen is still well placed. And white is hanging on in this position. But Carlsen played queen d1, and this was a mistake. Rook g6 is an excellent move, and basically Erigaisi takes the initiative. He is very dangerous in these positions. So if rook g1 now, then bishop here, and black's pieces start to look very, very dangerous. And it's very hard for white to break free from this position. Carlsen played at rook e2 instead of rook g1. A rook g1 would have been a little bit better, but rook e2, I'm afraid, lost immediately to queen takes f3. Carlsen decided to resign here, very understandable. If pawn takes queen, then this, bishop takes, discovered check, and yeah, just bishop takes queen and black is a piece up. Alternatively, after queen takes f3, could bring the rook back to cover g2, but then the queen just slides away. And without the pawn on f3, then this is an absolutely miserable position for white to defend, with all black's pieces in the attack. So knight g3 threatened, and if king g1, then this can be taken anyway. At knight e3 check, forks king and queen. So a collapse from Carlsen, and yeah, he's having a difficult time. In fact, he lost the next game after this. So is time catching up with Magnus Carlsen? We'll have to see. There's so many interesting games in this World Rapid Team Championship. I strongly recommend dipping in and checking out the commentary and looking at the games afterwards, because there are so many strong players in it. Anyway, I might see how Carlsen is doing later on, or perhaps check out some of the other players as well in my next video. Thanks for watching.